We are grateful to have Tim St. Vincent this afternoon. So Tim is the Credit Counselling Society's financial educator for Manitoba and Saskatchewan and is based out of Winnipeg. Tim has over 25 years experience in financial services and is a retired certified financial planner. Tim has also completed the Canadian Securities course, has achieved his certificate in management honors, and is a certified educator in personal finance. Tim believes strongly in the power of education, planning, and acting on your plan. Welcome, Tim, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to chat with everyone today. I'm looking for it. This is a very timely topic. Before I get into the webinar material, proper, I just want to maybe cover off very briefly who Credit Counselling Society is, what we do, just so you can have an understanding of our point of view. So very briefly, we're a nonprofit organization, and we focus on helping people understand how our financial system works, how money works, with a particular focus on credit and debt. And we try and help people in a couple of ways. One is through education, and that's the side of the organization I'm on, where we do a series of workshops and webinars. We have 25 different ones. And I'll do them for groups like this. I'll do them for groups like the Winnipeg Harvest, the food banks, for people who are struggling to put food on the table, Canadian Mental Health Association, Corrections Canada. That's just a nice way of saying I go to jail once a month, but you know, they keep letting me out, so that's good, right? My parking tickets haven't got up to me yet. But I also work with the big six banks, the credit unions, large employers like Boeing, financial institutions, credit unions, Investors Group, Canada Life, city, provincial, federal government, law society. And I mentioned that range from the food banks to the law society intentionally, because that really represents the range of people who come to us for assistance. From people who might not have the best education, might not have the best income, to people who have several degrees behind your name and can be making $300,000 a year or more. Having financial difficulty, there's no real safety net. Anyone and everyone can have problems. So on the education side, we hope if we provide people with the foundation in terms of how our financial system works, hopefully they won't have any problems. We know that's a little ambitious of us, so we have the second half of credit counseling, and that's where we do the individual one-on-one credit counseling and budget preparation. So to give you an idea in terms of how it all flows and what the demand is like, as an organization, we're from BC to Ontario. Last year, we had almost 83,000 people come to us for help. Many people are struggling, and that's important for people to realize, because if anyone is having any challenges, you should never think you're alone. You know, we don't advertise a lot, and even with that, we still had almost 83,000 people come to us for assistance. Now, it's important to know we don't loan money. We don't do things called bankruptcies or consumer proposals. What we do is we focus on helping people understand their finances and how things work. Nothing wrong with bankruptcies or those other options. We just don't offer them. It's the right solution, right time for the right person. But we do want people to understand how they all work. So we do explain to our clients the pros and cons of each one. And then we'll tell them what we can do for free. For free, you can talk to our client care team. They're very good. They're sort of like your first point of entry. They can help a lot of people. For free, you can go to workshops and webinars like this. For free, you can talk to educators. People in my role, there's 10 of us. And you got a bit of my background there. Most of us have similar backgrounds, so we like to think that we're a good resource. For free, you can talk to the credit counselors. And what the credit counselors will do is they'll do a credit review. If you have a budget, they'll review your budget. If you don't have a budget, they'll help you create one. By the time people have seen a credit counselor, about 90% of people say, hey, this is great. I don't need any more help, because now I've got a budget, these workshops and webinars I can go to, and all these people I can chat with. About 9% need a little bit more help, and they'll go into a debt management program. And what we do there is, very briefly, is we'll take the budget we prepared and we go out and talk to our clients' lenders. And we'll say, well, look, this is how much money this person's making. This is how much is going towards debt. Long term, this isn't going to work, and they're heading for some difficulty. Instead of letting people have those challenges, we work with the lenders to bring the interest rates down towards zero. Then from the money we can save by reducing the interest rates, the money we can save by the budgeting process, we redirect those savings to pay off the debt. Again, that's why we don't loan money. Of the people who enroll in that program, 90% complete it successfully. What that means is 90% of them pay off all their debt. It takes a little bit of time. It takes time to get into trouble, so it takes time to get out of trouble. It takes about 2.5 to 3 years on average. We've been around for about 24 years, and in that time, we've helped people pay back almost $500 million. That's with a B, not with an M. $500 million. So it's a very successful program, and that's part of why the lenders will work with us to bring the interest rates down towards zero. So that's a little bit of us, who we are, what we do. I'll throw in a little bit more information about us near the end if you want to reach out to us for any additional questions. But with that, I'm going to get into the proper topic here, the main topic, planning for emergency reduced income. And this really has an eye towards COVID-19 and everything that we're all having to face and go through with this. So the objectives is by the end of this session, you should be able to describe a couple of ways to increase your income, list 2 ways to reduce your expenses, and create a course of action so that you can move forward. And that's really important, because if you sit through this session and you go, oh, hey, that makes sense, and yes, I can do that, and I should look into this, and then you do nothing, well, then unfortunately what that really means is you've wasted an hour and a half of your time, and we don't want anyone to waste their time. So part of what we want you to do is you're going through this, make some notes, think about what you would like to do, and then actually follow through on it. We share everything we do. Nothing's what's called proprietary. We share it all. So I will be forwarding a copy of all these slides on to Soicety, and she can forward it to anyone who's interested. A lot of these slides will have hyperlinks in them that will take you out to a website. Those hyperlinks will remain active. So when you get a copy of the presentation, you can click on that link and it will take you to the same websites I'm going to show you today. Our agenda, we're going to talk about dealing with reduced income. We're going to talk about managing your income, reducing your expenses, and in some cases, eliminating some of them. We're going to talk about managing impulse spending, and that's a really important one, because no matter how good your budget is, whether it's good times or bad times, if you're a high impulse shopper, impulse spending can destroy the best of budgets. So we're going to spend some time on that. And it's important to notice the last 2 points: managing credit, managing debt. Those are 2 completely separate things. Lots of people use the terms interchangeably, and I'll admit I do it myself from time to time, but they are 2 separate but interwoven things. What I mean by that is credit is free for the most part. Credit costs you nothing. I can have a $50,000 line of credit. That costs me nothing. I can have a $10,000 credit card. So long as I don't have an annual fee, it costs me nothing. The second you use credit, it becomes debt. And that's when it starts costing you something. So you have credit and you have debt, 2 separate things, but they are intertwined. You cannot have debt without credit, because first you have to get the credit, but when you use the credit, that is when it becomes debt. So we treat them as 2 separate items because they are 2 separate items. It's important to understand why people have financial difficulty. So when people come to us for help, we always ask them, well, what was the cause of their challenges? What caused them to have some problems? And that's important for us, because once we understand the root causes, we can help build programs around that. So I'm showing you here the top 7 reasons why people come to us for difficulty. And I'm going to start in the middle of the list, number 4, no budget, because we're going to touch on budgeting a little bit through this presentation. We've got a completely separate one that goes into more detail, but we'll touch on it a little bit here. Half the country has no budget. Half the country is living paycheck to paycheck, and that's a stat before COVID-19 came out. I'm sure it's going to be worse once we start realizing and seeing the full impacts of it. So I don't think it's a coincidence that half the country has no budget and half the country is living check to check. And that's important for a lot of reasons. One reason being, within a budget, you should have something called an emergency fund. The number one emergency that most people will run into somewhere in their lives is job loss. So then it's not a surprise then that the number one reason why people come to us is unemployment, job loss. Now pretend you're part of that half the country that has no budget. That means you have no emergency fund. You've now run into the number one emergency that hits most people, job loss. Well, you might get a severance package, you might get employment insurance, or in today's world, you might get CERB payments. but it's usually never enough. It doesn't quite replace the money that you're no longer getting from having worked. So what do most people do to fill that gap? They reach for credit. So then it's not a big surprise that the second most common reason people come to us for help is excessive use of credit. So those three are very tightly tied in together. Injury and illness is in there to round it up to number 4, because injury and illness is basically the same as losing your job, except now you get workers' compensation if you're injured, as opposed to other forms of payment. So those 4 are very tightly tied in together. Number 5 is separation and divorce. We do a lot of work with family counselors and divorce lawyers. Failed businesses, usually, again, typically because of excessive use of credit. Number 7, high housing costs. So this is a really good list, and it helps us understand how people have problems and then create programs around it. But the most important thing about this list, the most powerful thing about this list, is not what is on the list. It is what is missing from the list. The best part of this list is what the list doesn't have. And this list doesn't have something called a socioeconomic boundary. Now that's just a nice big fancy word that just simply means this list doesn't care about what part of society you're from. That's the socio. It doesn't care if you're from a so-called struggling neighborhood. It doesn't care if you're from what's considered a good neighborhood. It doesn't care if you're an economic day laborer. That's your economic part of socioeconomic. It doesn't care if you're an unemployed day laborer. It doesn't care if you're a professional making $250,000 a year. It doesn't care. There is no boundary. As I mentioned earlier on, that's really important to realize, because quite often people will come to us for help just a little too late. And by a little too late, I mean a week, 10 days. And that's because they're embarrassed and they think they're the only ones having problems. If we can help people understand that half the country is struggling and it has nothing to do with your income, has nothing to do with your education, then hopefully if they're struggling, they'll come to us or someone else and ask for some help while there are still options. And we'll talk about some of that a little bit later on. It's really important while we're going through all the challenges with COVID-19 to look at what we can control and to focus on that, because there's so much we can't control, and that's maybe where sometimes people get a little lost. So our feelings, to a greater extent, we can control that. Not completely at times, but to a greater extent, we can control that. We can certainly control our behaviors that go around those feelings, and our spending, which can be a behavior in itself that comes from the feelings. So we'll talk about that when we get into impulse spending, and all the different resources that we can access. It's important to realize that if you happen to be part of the group of people who have lost their job as a result of everything that's going through with COVID-19, that losing your job is considered the second most emotionally stressful event that a person can go through, second only to loss of a loved one. When someone passes, you typically go through what's called the 7 stages of grief. So 7 distinct steps that people go through. You go through the 7 steps for the most part when you lose your job. So if you're feeling stressed, worried, anxious, it's normal, perfectly normal. I've been working from home now for about 2 months. My wife is a hygienist, so I'll share some personal stories with you. My wife is a hygienist. She's been out of work for 2 months, and it was very stressful, and we were worried, and we were feeling anxious. When the CERB checks came in, well, that helped, made us feel better. But still, there's a lot of stress and worry and anxiety out there. So if you're feeling that, it's normal. Anger and resentment, we didn't get to that stage, but depression, yeah, there were some blue days. I'll be honest, there were some blue days because you're getting worried. What's going to happen? How long is this going to go on for? What happens when the CERB checks stop if this is continuing to go on? So there's absolutely normal to feel and think all these things. One of the key things you really have to focus on is, who do I want to be during COVID-19, right? Who am I? What parts of me are going to come to the surface? Many people start off in the fear zone, and that's normal, right? And we saw this when it was in the news all the time about people buying excessive amounts of toilet paper, right? A little bit of mob hysteria going on here. You grab food, grab toilet paper, medications, things that either you don't need or things you do need, but you buy way too much of it, hugely excessive amounts. And that's normal. That's when we're in the fear zone. Over time, we progress and we move into the learning zone. And when you get into the learning zone, you learn to not to focus on the things that you can't control, because quite honestly, it'll be very stressful if you do. So we learn to stop focusing on things we can't control. We stop compulsively consuming things that are hurting us, and that can be from food to news. I know, again, using my wife and myself as an example, we were watching news almost, obsessively for the first couple of weeks. And then we realized, well, the news is always bad. There's nothing we can do to control this. We didn't stop watching the news, but we cut it down to a couple of times a day just to see what was going on. The other thing we were doing compulsively is we ate a lot of junk food. It helped to release some stress. So we've absolutely gone through all of these stages, and now we're moving more into the growth zone, right? Where we're starting to look at what we can do to help other people. We've kind of moved into that a little bit. We have some elderly neighbors who might not be able to get out for groceries. So if we go out for groceries, we'll get that for them. Or they'll have dogs and maybe they can't take them out for walks. They don't feel comfortable going outside. So we've got a dog too. So we'll take their dog when we take our dog for a walk. So you really need to focus on who you want to be as you're going through all this. There are tons of resources out there to help you if you're having some challenges. And again, I want to emphasize it's normal. Don't be reluctant to say, hey, I'm having some challenges. I need some help. This slide up here is just an organization I happen to be familiar with, so I put it up as a resource. They, of course, are working by phone right now, as pretty much everybody else is. They're not the only resource out there. There's places like Clinic, there's places like Canadian Mental Health Association. There might be resources that you're familiar with. Some WISE have some resources. So I just put this one up there so you can have an extra resource to reach out to. Now, I want to pause here for just half a second too, and maybe something I should have mentioned at the beginning. With this presentation, our intention is not to present ourselves as the experts on COVID-19. We can't. I don't honestly think anybody can, because there's too much information out there and it's changing constantly. Something I could say today could be out of date by tomorrow. So instead, the way we position ourselves, the way we position this webinar, is we want to give you a good, solid, general foundation of what you're going through, of the options that are out there, some of the financial impacts, and some things you can do to help get yourself through those financial impacts, and to give you a lot of resources that you can go to resources that are always up to date. So we'll go through some slides that have some link to some websites, and for the most part, they're federal government websites. So you can be sure if there's a change, it's going to be there first. So we're going to give you those reference links so you can always make sure you've got the most current and the most up-to-date information. When it comes to income, we want to focus on 5 steps for dealing with reduced income. It'll be pretty much what we covered in our agenda. How do we find some extra income? How do we reduce or eliminate our expenses? How do we manage our impulse spending, which is very, very powerful? Again, how do we manage credit, and how do we deal with debt? Keeping in mind that these are 2 separate things and we need to learn to think of them that way. So let's start off with income. What can we do to help our income move along here? Excuse me. And for that, I'm going to call out to some websites. And Soicety, if it doesn't call it directly to the website, let me know. So the first one I'm going to go to here is, how do I apply for CERB? Again, my wife's a hygienist. She was having some challenges. So hopefully everyone now should be able to see a slide in front of them that says applying for CERB. And if you can't, please let me know.
No,
And
I can't.
You can or cannot?
I cannot, no.
Cannot. Okay, so let me, just a quick little change here. Okay. You should be able to see it now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So again, my wife's been out of work for a couple of months rather. And so she started off by applying for employment insurance, and then she was told to go apply for CERB. So she applied for CERB, and for anyone who hasn't done that yet, it literally took her about 3 minutes. She did it over the phone. We'll go through that in a second. It was very fast, very easy. And when she was done, she got a little message at the end, said, hey, you'll get a check in 2 to 3 business days, because we were doing automatic deposits straight into your account. If you elect to have the check sent to you by physical mail, that can take up to 10 business days. So it's much faster if you select this option. So if you go to this website, It talks about applying for CERB. What do you need to do? Updated eligibility, who can apply, how do you apply, getting your payments, how do you return or repay a payment if you've been overpaid, because that's happening with some people, and how do you contact them about CERB if you have any questions. So let's click on how to apply. Okay, it takes you on a page that's very easy. Determine your eligibility before you start. There's some questions that you can go through here, just more for information than anything else. And then you get into the apply, okay? And you can apply two ways. You can apply if you have what's called a CRA My account. If you don't have one, it can take a little while to set one up. So I suggest an easier way, call the toll-free line. And here's a 1-800 number you can call. This is the number that my wife called. Again, very easy. She didn't call super early. She called like 8 in the morning on a Tuesday. She got in right away. Literally, she was on the phone for 3 minutes and she was done. So it is a very easy, very smooth process, and the website is very, very easy to follow through. And I'll take you to a couple of other links, but there's some good information on this website. I'm going to go back one here for a second. Contacting us about CERB. Again, you can go through the CRA My account, or you can call CRA directly. It does take a little bit of while if you call, so that's where you would have an advantage if you had a CRA My account. Okay, and with that, I'm going to flip you back to the presentation for half a second. Okay, can you guys see the presentation again?
Yes.
Perfect. And I'm just going to check as I go through that, just make sure I'm not someplace where you guys can't see me. You may still need, in some circumstances, to apply for EI. Or you may need to apply for EI once the CERB benefits ends, because you can apply for EI once CERB is over. So I'm going to show you just quickly the how to apply for EI. I just Googled Service Canada, which is employment insurance, and apply online. And there are a couple of options. And let me just change my share here so you can see it. And okay. So now you should be able to see, it says EI regular benefits. And again, the advantage of going to a government site, all the updates are right at the top of the screen. So if anything's changed, it's right there. It's very similar to the CERB site, the overview, eligibility, how much can you get? So I'll just click directly on apply. And it brings me to the apply section. And it just gives you some criteria. It's a little bit tougher. For EI, they need more information than what CERB does. And then if you're ready to start, you just click ready to start, and it's going to ask you some questions. The website says it takes about an hour. My wife went through this initially, and it doesn't take that long. It takes about 25 minutes to answer all the questions. So as I said, it does take more time to go through EI than it does through CERB. And everyone should start the process by going through CERB. That's just the way things are right now. And if you should be applying for EI, they will redirect you to EI. So always start on CERB. Now, if you have any questions about CERB and how it works and anything to that effect, there is an absolutely excellent FAQ, frequently asked questions page on CERB. Again, I'm going to take you out to a Government of Canada website because that's the most up-to-date information. So give me just half a second here. Okay, so now you should be able to see the questions and answers on CERB. And again, this is coming straight from the Government of Canada. This is an excellent FAQ site. And I'll just scroll through some of the questions so you can see it. So there's a whole section on how do I apply, a section on eligibility, a section on income requirements, a section on payments, how, when, how much, a section on maternity, parental benefits, students, apprentices, retired people, people with disabilities, part-time workers, self-employed people. It is an excellent, excellent website. So if you have any specific questions, this is a great place to go. I haven't run across a question yet that I couldn't find an answer to on this website. Sometimes I had to do a little digging, but it is absolutely an excellent website to go out and find information. Now, if anyone happens to have a little side business that they run on their own, if they're self-employed, or they have a cottage business, or what's called a sole proprietorship, which is a small business you run on your own, there is an organization called the Business Development Bank of Canada, and they have their own program to help people through COVID-19. Now, when I went yesterday, they were upgrading their website, so I couldn't get into it. So let's see. Okay, so they finished their upgrades. So you can see right at the top, and I won't go right into it, but you see right at the top, they say, hey, support for coronavirus, learn more. Oh, I don't think I shared that screen. Let me go and share that screen. There you go. So when I clicked on the link to go to the Business Development Bank of Canada, it brought me to their screen. And they do have a screen here where they have programs specifically for people who are struggling through COVID-19 who also happen to own their own business. So again, that's a very, very good resource for you. Okay, so now we should be back to my slideshow presentation. So this is a really good page. If you ask for a copy of the presentation, this is a page I strongly recommend you go to. It's slide number 11, and it has lots of excellent links in there for you. Now this next slide, it shows at a high level what you need to do for CERB and how you qualify, and it's pretty easy. We've got the phone number down here in the bottom right-hand corner for you again. And then basically you can qualify for up to $2,000 a month, or rather it is $2,000 a month, it's a flat amount. If you're salaried, contractual, self-employed, they've now included a section for students, and students are now eligible as well. Main criteria for the employed is you have to have made $5,000 in the past 12 months or sometime in 2019. And if you can basically check off any of these boxes, you're eligible. And that's what it comes down to. And that's why it's so easy when you go on the phone. They just ask you half a dozen questions. And if you get to the point where you say yes to any of these, you're qualified. So it is a very good site, it's a computerized phone. So you call in, you get an automated message. It's very, very easy to work through, nothing to be intimidated about. Now, if you decide to call, in order to reduce the likelihood of their systems crashing, because a phone system can crash if it gets too many phone calls, just like a computer can. And in order to reduce the likelihood of you having to wait a long time, they have a recommendation as to when you call, and that's based on the month you were born in. So if you're born from January to March, they'd like you to call on Monday. From April to June, they'd like you to call on Tuesday. My wife was born in April, so she called on Tuesday. July to September on Wednesday. October to December on Thursday, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, it's a bit of a free-for-all. Anyone and everyone can call. They don't care what your birth month was. So again, it's just a good way for them to help manage things. And it worked well. My wife's called in twice now, each time less than 3 minutes, never had to wait. So it seems to be working quite well. When we're looking at possible sources of income, we've kind of covered off employment insurance and CERB, and we're going to re-emphasize that as we go through it, because that is an excellent source. I want to make sure everyone taps into it who can. If you have an emergency fund, there is no better time than now to tap into it. I can't think of a better example of an emergency. I mean, nobody expected anything like this to come up. So by definition, this is an emergency. How you access these funds is something you need to think about. Your emergency fund might just be in a regular savings account, or it might be in something called a tax-free savings account. And a tax-free savings account, you never pay any taxes on what's in there. So some people might go, hey, this is great. It's a tax-free savings account. I'm just going to take some money out and go start paying some bills with it. There are no tax implications for taking money out of a tax-free savings account, a TFSA. There are, however, financial considerations. And by what I mean by that is, if you watching the news, you've been hearing how the stock market, the TSX, is going up and down and up and down and all over the place, and there's been big drops up to 30%, and it's having a big impact. So a tax-free savings account, a TFSA, it's like a label. You can stick this label on anything you want, right? So you can stick this label on your savings account. You can stick this label on mutual funds. You can stick this label on something called guaranteed investment certificates. You can stick this label on stocks. You can stick this label on just about anything. So you have to consider, let's say you have an emergency fund, which happens to be in a tax-free savings account. And that money is invested maybe in a basic savings account, a regular savings account. Maybe you also have a guaranteed investment certificate. Maybe you also have a mutual fund. And you just go, oh, what the heck? No tax consequences, doesn't matter what I do, I'm just going to take it out of my mutual fund. Well, you shouldn't do that, because you need to look at your different investments, where your money is sitting, and see maybe one's dropped in value more than the other. Well, if this one's dropped more in value than this one over here, you don't want to be taking the money out of this one. So before you take any money out, you should talk to a financial planner, a financial advisor, someone at your bank or your credit union, anyone who might be helping you manage your money, to help figure out what is the best place to take that money out of. It's not just as easy as, oh, hey, it's just in an account I don't pay any taxes on, I'll just take it out of there. It's not that easy. You don't pay taxes, but there is a financial consideration. Now, if you have some money in something called the Registered Retirement Savings Plan, or RRSP, then there are two things you have to think about. There are tax considerations, and there are, again, financial implications. So same as the tax-free savings account, it's a label. An RRSP is a label. You can stick it on anything, on a savings account, on a GIC, on a mutual fund, a stock, a bond, just a label. If you take money out of an RRSP, it's taxable income. So that means you have to pay taxes on anything you take out of an RRSP. And what happens is, as soon as you take money out, if it's less than $5,000, right away they take off 10%. And that 10% goes to pay your taxes, or to make an effort towards paying some of your taxes on it. It's not a penalty, it's just prepaying your taxes. So you have to realize, if I'm going to take money out, right off the top, I'm losing 10% because that goes to taxes. And then, same as a TFSA, there's a financial consideration. You have to look at which account's gone up or down more with everything that's been happening, and pick the account most likely that's gone down the least amount. So again, you want to talk to a financial planner, an advisor, someone at your bank or credit union who's ever helping you manage your money. So it's really important to understand that implications. Okay, so I got a couple of questions here, so I'm going to jump into the chat for half a second. I used to work and lost my work because of my brain injury. I accumulated a lot of debt in the process of appealing for my disability. Now I'm on CPP disability, and it's barely enough for myself, let alone pay down my debts. What should I do? Okay, well, that's a very big question. And in order really to make any kind of recommendation, you and I would need to sit down for an hour. Anyone who can give you a detailed answer, like just like that right off the top of their head, they're probably trying to sell you something. What I would suggest is, at the end of the presentation, I'll give you our contact information for Credit Counselling Society. This is the type of stuff that we deal with, people who are on disability, people who are having problems, with their debt, and we work to find you a solution. But it's very specific to your case, so I can't give you an answer over chat with not having a lot of information. So maybe at the end, make sure you get that information and give us a call, and then we can set up an appointment and talk to you in a little more detail. Question 2, I'm living with my parents right now because of COVID in Selkirk. Is there a way that I can write off my rent in Winnipeg? Well, you get a property tax credit, whether you're renting or owning a property. So any time you spent as a renter, you get to write off a portion of that when you file your tax return under your Manitoba property tax credit. So again, I don't want to turn this into a tax workshop. That's a very good question. But yes, you can write off any rent that was paid in the 2020 calendar year when you file your taxes for 2020 by April of 2021. So that's a good question. Okay, question 3. Can I take money out of my RDSP? Okay, so I'm not an expert on an RDSP, so I can't give you a definitive answer. And this comes under, there's just so many options and programs out there. I believe you can take it out of an RDSP the same way you can out of an RSP. I am not sure if there's any tax implications to that or not. But there will always be financial considerations. So again, I would talk with whatever organization you have the RDSP in, and let them make a recommendation as to what account specifically should come out of. And they should be able to give you a little bit more information on that. Replacement has been terminated. Can I apply to SERP? Okay, so I want to try and stay away from trying to give you definitive answers when it comes to SERB. And it's not that I'm dodging it, it's quite simply because the answers change almost daily. An answer I give today may not be correct tomorrow because the programs are constantly changing. The main requirement for SERB is that you have to have generated $5,000 worth of income in the previous year. And you are no longer earning income because of SERB. If you can say yes to those two, then generally you would be eligible for SERB. The only one who can say yes 100% is CRA, Canada Revenue Agency. So I would strongly suggest you call in on the toll-free number. It's popped up a couple of times. It'll pop up again a little bit later on. They are the only ones who can definitively say yes or no. Most people qualify, but not everyone. But they are, if you recall when I was going through the FAQ page, there was a section in there on disabilities. If we have time at the end of the session, I'd be more than happy to call that page back up and we can look at it together. We'll see how the time goes. Okay, someone says, I was told the only way to get out of debt is to file for bankruptcy. Okay, so very good questions there. First off, bankruptcy is going to cost you about $1,800. So that's information everyone should know. Bankruptcy can also create barriers to employment. If you're looking for future employment, a bankruptcy can create a barrier to employment. It can also create barriers to obtaining credit in the future. It can even make it hard to rent an apartment because all this bankruptcy shows up and has a very significant negative impact on your credit score. I cannot comment as to whether or not your only option is bankruptcy, because again, I would need at least an hour-long conversation with you where I would go through all your assets, all your liabilities, what kind of debt they are they secured, are they unsecured, what your income is. There's a ton of information I would need to know to say whether or not that was a correct assessment. There are many other options other than bankruptcy. There's something called a debt settlement. There's something called a consumer proposal. We do what's called a debt management program. So there are lots of other options. Again, I would suggest, I'll go through our contact information again at the end of the presentation, that you take down our toll-free number and give us a call, because honestly, someone has to sit with you for about 45 minutes to an hour to completely understand your finances before we can make a recommendation. If it turns out that bankruptcy is the correct solution for you, then we can forward you on to a trustee who looks after that. We don't do them ourselves, but there are some very good trustees out there. So it's a very good question. Now, in terms of not being able to afford the fee for bankruptcy, some trustees are a little soft on the fee, and they will negotiate and see what they can do to bring the fee down. I haven't run into anyone who will completely waive the fee, but many of them will reduce the fee and work to try and find a solution for you, keeping in mind there are other solutions. So a consumer proposal, for example, it's different from a bankruptcy. In a bankruptcy, you pay a small amount of what you owe, or nothing. It's usually between 0 to 10% of what you owe. But on a consumer proposal, you pay half of what you owe, but the fees are less, and the impact to your credit score is less. Then there's things like what we do in a debt management program, where we work to find a way to help you pay off the debt over several months. And that has, again, a different impact. So excellent questions, but not questions I can answer without sitting down with you and chatting for at least an hour. So our contact information will be at the end. And make sure you get the toll-free number, give us a call, and then we can set an appointment where we can have that type of conversation, and then we can list all the options with you. Please keep the questions coming. They are very, very good, and I do appreciate them coming through. I'm sorry I can't always give you a specific answer, but that's simply because I don't know the entirety of your financial situation, and that's a very personal one-on-one type of conversation. But we can arrange for that afterwards, not with myself, but with one of the credit counselors. Okay, other options we need, oh, to make sure I didn't skip a page. Yeah, I actually didn't skip a page there. So it's very important that, you know, you look at the CERB portal. If you're not sure, go through the CERB portal, and that will help filter you out. It's also important to know that after CERB has expired, and if you're eligible for EI, you can still apply for EI. Having collected CERB payment does not stop you from being eligible to collect your full EI entitlement. So you can get that as well. And as always, always look to your provincial government for any type of social assistance programs that are out there. There are many programs. Other options, and one of the trickiest ones is family and friends. Nobody likes to go to family and friends to ask for money, but you know, that's part of being family and friends, that, you know, you are available there as a resource if people need that level of help. My biggest recommendation I can make is if you go to family and friends, and remember, they may be in jobs where they're not being impacted by this. They may be in essential services, might be working for the government. There's lots of people who are not being impacted, who are in a position to help others. If you go to family and friends to ask for assistance, please put it in writing. And now that doesn't mean, this is very important, that doesn't mean that you don't trust them. That doesn't mean that they don't trust you. What it means is when you put it in writing is that you both have the same understanding. What I mean by that is my nephew might say, come to me and say, you know, gee, Uncle Tim, I'm having some problems with this COVID-19 thing. Can you loan me some money and help me out? And I say, sure, we can figure something out. And so he might say to me, okay, this is how I'm going to pay you. And he is saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's what he's saying. I, on the other hand, I might be hearing him say 6, 7, 8, 9. So he's saying one thing, but I might be hearing something different. And then we both say, okay, great, we can do that. And then when it comes time to make the payments, I'm expecting him to do one thing, he's expecting to do something else. And that's how people get into fights about all this. If you put it down in writing, then it clearly says, hey, this is how much he's going to borrow, and this is how he's going to plan on paying it back, and it clearly states what I'm expecting. It's very hard to have a disagreement then, because we can both clearly see what's going on. But if it's just one person talking and another person hearing, it's very easy to make a mistake. So I strongly recommend put it in writing. Has nothing to do with trust. And again, I'll use myself as an example. When I bought my house, I borrowed some money from my parents. I made sure I put down in writing how much I was borrowing, how much I was paying them back, when I was paying them back, the interest amount, and when I would be done. That doesn't mean I didn't trust them. Doesn't mean they didn't trust me. It just meant we both clearly understood what was going on. And quite honestly, I've got a big family, I've got siblings, and it took away the possibility of any sibling saying, hey, what are you doing here? You're taking advantage of mom and dad. And I can say, well, no, look, here's the payment schedule. I'm paying them what they would have been making if they kept the money in the bank, plus a little bit extra. So they're not losing any money. And here's when it's going to be paid off by. So it really reduces the likelihood of having any disagreements about this afterwards. So again, I strongly, strongly recommend putting it down in writing. We already covered off retirement savings. You know, really, it's important to consider the tax consequences and the financial consequences if you take anything out of retirement plan. Places where you can go and look for work. Well, you know, if your income's down, look at getting some part-time work, some temporary work, go to a placement agency. You know, lots of places, I know what you're thinking, are not hiring. Lots of places are cutting back. Some places are going out of business. But lots of places are expanding and they just can't get enough people. You know, people to help with the essential services to free up frontline staff. People in grocery stores to stock shelves. You know, sometimes the reason why the shelves are empty is not because there's nothing there, it's because they just don't have enough people to keep the shelves stocked all the time. Warehouse distribution. I know a fellow who he has a warehouse and he delivers produce products to the grocery stores and to the pharmacies. And his busiest time of the year is December, when he usually does about, what was it now, 230 deliveries a week is what he would do, about 230 deliveries a week. That was his busiest time at Christmas. Right now, he is doing 280 deliveries a week. So he's busier than his busiest time of the year, and he says he could do more, but he doesn't have enough people in the warehouse to move the products around the warehouse. He doesn't have enough people to fill up the trucks with the stuff that needs to be shipped out. He doesn't have enough people to drive the trucks. So there are certainly people and organizations out there who are looking to hire. So that's something important to keep in mind. If you'd ever thought about starting a business, ideally an online business, now is the perfect time to be looking to do something like that. And it's a good time to look, is there stuff that maybe you want to sell? Kijiji is a great place to go for something like that. And sometimes, depending on how things are going, you might want to sell things that you otherwise might not want to. So for example, my plan was to retire in 8 years. That may not happen anymore because things are just a little bit crazy. So it's something I have to accept. In my retirement, part of my plan was to sell my comic collection. I'm a bit of a geek. I've got a pretty big comic collection, and I was going to sell that in retirement. Well, I might need to sell that now and, not wait until retirement. So again, there are things we need to look at, and some of the solutions might not be comfortable. But if we're having some challenging times, then we need to look at some of these things. Okay, so we talked about the income side. Let's look at the expenses side now. This is really where you have the greatest level of control. You have more control over your expenses than you do over your income. And the key to controlling your expenses is one word, but I'm going to repeat it 3 times: budget, budget, budget. That is the best way to help control your expenses. I tell people, if you don't have a budget, and it's going to sound a little harsh, but if you don't have a budget, you're not in control of your life. Your money is. Because if you don't have a budget, what happens? If you want to spend some money, some significant money on something, what do? You turn to the money and you say, can I spend you? Can I afford to spend you? So now you're giving control of your life over to your money. If you have a budget, you're going to reverse that process. Instead of asking your money for permission to do something, to spend it, you're going to create a budget. And through the budget, you're going to tell your money what it is going to do for you. Having a budget is what's going to get you back in control. Tracking your expenses is very important as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. You absolutely need to track your expenses, and you need to start looking at doing that now. Well, really, what is a budget? Some people don't like the word budget. They get a little scared of the word. It has some negative feelings around it. It's like, oh, you have a budget, you must be having some problems. Or I don't want a budget because I'm going to lose control of my money. I'm going to be forced to save. And well, let's stop thinking of it in those terms. I don't have a budget, because really, what is a budget? A budget is a written spending plan. A budget says, this is how I'm going to spend my money now, and this is how I'm going to save my money so I can spend it later. So I don't have a budget. I have a spending plan. Right? Doesn't that sound a lot cooler? I mean, would you rather tell someone, hey, I've got a budget, because there's negative words around that, or I've got a spending plan, right? Spending plan, that sounds pretty cool. That's what a budget is. A budget says, this is how I'm going to spend my money now, and this is how I'm going to spend my money later. And that's all based on your own choices and priorities, right? It's all about how you think and feel about money. And we get into that into our core budgeting workshop, where we talk about how you have to understand that you have a relationship with money. There's good parts and there's bad parts, and you need to understand what the bad parts are so you can work to fix them. So a budget is going to include your take-home pay. It's called your net pay, how much money actually gets deposited into your account, your monthly living expenses, and money you need to put aside for irregular expenses. And that's an expense that you know is going to happen, but does not happen every month. So it makes it a little bit harder to figure out. For your emergency expenses, like what we're in now, and for your savings expenses. And it's very important that you learn to think of savings as an expense, because too many people pay all their bills, and what's ever left over, they throw into savings, and they say, that's my savings, okay? You need to think of that a little bit differently too. You need to think of savings as an expense. And an expense means it's a bill. And like all your bills, you want to try and pay it. So instead of paying it last, you want to pay that bill first. So you need to start a program where you start automatically depositing. It can be like $10 every 2 weeks into a savings account. The dollar amount doesn't really matter initially. It's just to start that pattern of behavior, to form that new relationship with money. And then once you start doing maybe $10 every 2 weeks, you go, hey, that's not too bad, right? I can manage this. Let's see how much I can really do if I really push this a little bit. So it's important to start thinking of savings as an expense and to start paying that bill the way you would pay any other bill. Now, as part of budgeting, you absolutely need to track your expenses, okay? A budget is sort of like the heart of your financial plan. Tracking expenses is the heart of your budget. I always tell people, if you do not track your expenses, you don't have a budget. Because think about it for a minute. A budget, let's say your budget's over here. And what your budget says is, this is how I hope I'm spending my money. This is how I wish I'm spending my money. Over here, you track your expenses. This is how you are really spending your money. And you need to get them to talk, right? And sometimes they fight, because sometimes how you think you're spending your money doesn't match up with how you wish you were spending your money, right? So if you don't track your expenses, you don't have a budget. All you have is a wish list, because that's all that's left. That list that says, this is how I wish I'm spending my money. Wishing doesn't pay the bills. So it's very, very important that you track those expenses. Tracking is what's going to make your budget work. It tells you the truth about what's going on with your money. It's going to show you your habits, the good parts of your relationship with money and the bad parts of your relationship with money. Once you do that, it's going to show you where to make changes. Once you've made those changes, well, that's what's going to get you back in control. This is what's going to get you back in control of your finances, because without a budget, it is really tough. How do you track your expenses? Well, you know what? We don't care. That's our secret. We don't care how you track your expenses. There's lots of ways to do them. You can see them on the screen in front of you. Any and every one is perfect if you're going to use it. The perfect way to track your expenses is the way that makes sense for you. So for example, you could use pen and paper. We have a little tracking booklet you can download from our website. We have a spreadsheet or an Excel file you can download from our website if you want. My sister uses the envelope method. So what she does is she has an envelope for several different categories of expenses. So when she comes home from shopping, she throws her receipt into the correct envelope. At the end of the week, she just totals them up. That's how she tracks her expenses. Works great for her. You can put apps on the smartphone if you want. There's some really good ones out there. There's one called YNAB, Y-N-A-B. It stands for You Need a Budget. So it's an easy one to remember. There's another good one out there called Mint, like the candy, M-I-N-T. So that's another easy one to remember, and they're both very, very good. The main thing, again, is we don't care which system you use. It could be even, maybe you've got a different system than this. The perfect system is a system that's going to work for you. And that's really what it comes down to. Tracking is going to help you, focus on things and identify on specific areas where you need to make changes. And this is going to show you where you can get started. And you need to track everything. And this is really hard for people to understand at first. They go, come on, really? Do I have to track everything? What's $2 here, $3 there? I mean, what's a cup of coffee and a muffin? Okay, well, what is a cup of coffee and a muffin? Let's say that's $5 a day. And you go, oh, I'm not going to track that. $2 here, $3 there. It doesn't matter. If you lose track of $5 a day, you will have lost $1,825 a year. Just because I don't need to track $2 here, $3 there. What does it matter? It adds up, and it adds up very, very quickly. And it's important to realize that. With respect to housing, if you are renting, if you have a home, the question often comes up, well, can I talk to my bank or my landlord, if I'm having some problems? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a landlord. I have a couple of houses that we rent out. And I had one tenant who was having some problems. So for that month, we cut her rent in half, and we took the remaining portion that she owed us, and we spread it out over the rest of the year. So that's how we helped one. Another one was having problems with groceries. So I'll be honest, if it's a good tenant, we want to help you. We want to do everything we can to help you. And even if you're not such a good tenant, most landlords still want to help you. So it's very important. If you're having problems, ask. Don't ask once the rent is already 6 days too late, past due, because you're going to have an upset landlord. Talk to your landlord before the rent is due and say, hey, listen, I'm having some problems. What can we do? And that's what my tenants did who are having problems, because I've always told them right up front, if you're having problems, let me know. Because if you're really late, the options for what I can offer you are limited. The sooner you contact me, the better. And there's other things you can do too around housing. If you have a house or an apartment and you've got a spare room, rent it out. That's what I've got a niece doing right now. She's got 2 spare rooms and she's renting it out. So you can do 2 things. If you've got a spare room, you can rent it out. Or if you're in an apartment and it's just too expensive right now, well, then maybe one of the things you could look at is moving in with someone and sharing room and board. So there are options out there. If you have a house and you're thinking of deferring a mortgage payment, there's some things you really need to understand. And this goes whether you're deferring just means delaying a payment on a mortgage, or if they're doing it on credit cards as well, you can defer or delay payments on credit cards. And pretty much it works the same way. So I'll talk about a mortgage because it's the larger debt that most people have. Let's say you have a mortgage and you have 10 years to finish paying it off. And that's what amortization means. That's just another big fancy word. Okay, amortization means how long until I pay something off. So if you've got 10 years left to pay something off and you ask for a 6-month deferral, that means you'll wait 6 months to make payments. Well, now it's going to take you 10 years and 6 months to pay it off. They're not forgiving that money. It's not a payment holiday. They're just going to add it back in to what you owe. So you still owe that amount of money. And it's going to take you 6 months longer to pay it off, because instead of being 10 years and 6 months now. But that's not the only thing. The interest that you should have paid during those 6 months where they're deferring or delaying your payments, they're taking that interest portion and they're adding it back into the principal, which is the amount that's still owing. So what happens essentially is they're charging you interest on the interest on the interest on the interest until you finish paying off this mortgage. So let's look at a very specific example. And I just see a question's popped up. I'll get to it in a second. Let's look at a very specific example here. Let's say someone is making monthly payments on their mortgage of $2,500, and the rate they're paying on their mortgage is 3%. They have 20 years left to pay it off. That's called the amortization. So they have 20 years left to pay it off, and they ask for a 6-month deferral. What that means is by the time they finish paying off their mortgage, that 6-month deferral, that 6-month delay, will actually have added on $11,508 to the mortgage. Now, that's just pure profit to the banks. It goes straight to the banks as profit. I have no problem with this arrangement, so long as the person who is doing this, who's asking for this delay, for asking this deferral, understands how it works and they need it. So if you can save your house by doing this, perfect, that's fine. The extra cost is worth it. You get to keep your house. But let's say maybe you only needed 1 month, not 6 months, just 1 month, and you didn't understand how this worked. All of a sudden, you've got an $11,500 bill where it could have been a much, much smaller bill, maybe a couple of thousand, because you didn't understand. So if you're looking to defer or delay your payments on a credit card, on a mortgage, or any other kind of debt, ask the lender, whoever organization you're dealing with, how much more are you going to have to pay as a result of this? What is the total increase in what's called your cost of borrowing? And that's something they should be able to figure out for you. If they can't figure it out for you, I would have a greater concern about what type of organization you're dealing with, because it's absolutely they should be able to figure it out. And until you know that amount, I wouldn't make the decision. So I've got a question here. Is it possible to budget on limited fixed income? Absolutely. We have a couple of workshops as well that deal specifically with that. Within time constraints, I can't get into the specifics of it or we'd be here forever. We have workshops on irregular income, which means you don't get paid on a regular basis. We have workshops on limited or smaller income. There are organizations out there called SEED, and they have what's called a savings circle. So there's lots of other options out there. So absolutely. And again, you can contact us afterwards if you want, and we can maybe give you with a little more information on that. Can we use credit counseling to assist us in budgeting and reducing debt even when working? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's almost exactly what we're there for. We're there to, we can help people who have some source of income, whether it's disability income or employment income, more readily, more easily than someone who doesn't have income. But even someone who doesn't have income, we'll do our best to see what we can help you with. The whole budgeting process is free. The whole credit counseling is free. The only thing we do have a fee on, and it's a small fee, it's for those people who need to go into what's called that debt management program. That's where we go out and we talk to your lenders on your behalf and we try and get interest rates reduced. There's a one-time setup fee because it's a legal process for $75. That gets the legal paperwork done. And then there can be a small monthly piece, and that will vary with each person's situation. But absolutely, that's what we're there for, to help people with budgeting, reducing debt. And if you're working, it just gives us more options to help you with. So we're in a better position then to help you out if we run into that. So yep, please keep the questions coming. They're good questions. When it comes to transportation, this might sound a little glib, but it's an easy one. Don't travel. We're supposed to be staying at home. If you can't manage to stay at home and you need to get out, do your best to avoid public transportation. If you do need to take public transportation, wear gloves and a mask. And if you can't get gloves and a mask, well, then you can make your own mask out of a piece of cloth. And gloves, well, I've worn my leather gloves sometimes if I couldn't get proper gloves. I'd wear outdoor gloves. And so it's just a matter of protecting yourself as best as you can, but try and limit how much you use public transportation while this is going on. Now, food, that's one of my favorite topics. We've got another workshop called Food and Finance, and we talk all about how to save money on groceries. So I'm just going to give you a very small piece on that because, again, time constraints. It's a good idea to create something called a meal plan. And what a meal plan says is this is what I'm going to have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then it goes like from Sunday to Saturday. And once you do that and you make a list of what you're going to have and when, you use that list to help you make a grocery list. So you take the different things you're going to be eating from your food plan. You go to the fridge and you go to the cupboards, you see what you've already got, and you cross those things off. Whatever's left on that list, that's your grocery list. Then when you go for groceries, ideally bring cash, leave your plastic at home. Now, some stores won't take cash right now because they want to reduce the touch points. So if you have to bring plastic and you use a debit card, you can control what the daily limit is on your debit card. So if you got a $500 daily limit, that's way too high. Bring it down to $100, $200. And that reduces the likelihood of you overspending. Same if you use a prepaid credit card. That's your money, it's not a credit card, it's prepaid. Try and keep the limit to a small amount to make it more reasonable. This is also a great chance to use your pantry and your freezer and to pull supplies out of there. Bulk buys are great. Just make sure it's actually a better deal. Not all bulk buys are actually a better deal. And go out to community markets, maintain your social distance, support the local economy, but you can get great deals at community markets as well. And if you're questioned with that, if you're careful with that, you can actually save a fair bit of money on your groceries. So how much money can you save? Well, this is my grocery bill. I shouldn't say my grocery bill. I'm not allowed to go for groceries because I'm a high impulse food shopper. So when it comes to groceries, my wife does the groceries. I'm not allowed in the grocery store because I go straight to the baked goods. I love my baked goods. But this is our grocery bill. So on the left-hand side here, if you were to add up everything that we bought, and we did not buy it on sale, if we did not use coupons, if we did not use price matching, this entire amount would have cost us about $75, $74.98. But because we price matched, we shopped on sale, did coupons, we saved, you can see down here in the bottom, we blew up the bottom portion over here, we saved 33%. Now the average person can save 25% on their grocery bill by shopping sales, coupons, and price matching. Now you need to think of this a little bit differently. If you save 25% of the grocery bill, that is like getting 3 months of free food. That's what 25% will equal to, 3 months of free food. Now my wife, I'll admit, is very good at this. She usually can save 30 to 35%. That's like 4 months of free food. And this particular bill, the reason why I printed this one up, because it was very good. Sales, coupons, price matching, she saved 33%. This bill should have been about $75, full price. She paid $2. For all of this, what should have been $75, she paid $2 because we're also on an Air Miles program. So different grocery stores, different chains, drug stores, they'll have different points programs. If they aren't charging you a high fee, they are worth looking at because on this grocery bill alone, we saved an additional $50. Just this one shop, we saved an additional $50 by cashing in some points. So it's very strong and powerful statement to show how much you can save. Now within that, there's other things you can do as well. There's programs out there called price matching and rebates, apps that you can put on your phone. So what a rebate is, that's when they give you money back. So a coupon is basically a rebate because they're discounting the price of something. So there's lots of good apps you can get. So I'll use a rebate app, for example, called Checkout 51. The way this one works is after you finish your grocery shopping, you take a picture of your bill and you send it off to Checkout 51. And they go through their computer and they try and find all the coupons that you could have used that you didn't know about for the stuff you bought. Then they go out to the manufacturer and they get the savings that you missed because you didn't have the coupons for it. They take this money and they put it in a bank account for you and they'll let the money pile up. Once they found a total of $20 worth of savings for you that you missed, they send you a check for $20. That's it. That's all there is to it. They'll take a little bit off the top for themselves because they have to make some money. There's a little bit of advertising on their website, but that's it. They don't even want your banking information. You don't have to worry about giving that up to them. They send you a physical check. It's like found money. It's an awesome way to save. So that is a rebate app. And that one example I gave is Checkout 51. Then there's price matching apps. And what these do, price matching app is save.ca, that's one. And you just put in whatever it is you're looking for. So Quaker Oat cereal, whatever it is you're looking for. Then it will tell you the prices in all the different stores. And it'll show you the lowest price. So if you go to a grocery store that matches price, all you do is you bring in your phone and say, hey, look, my phone says it costs this much less at this other store. They price match, they match prices for you. So that's part of how my wife will get some of those deals. That's part of her price matching. So there's a lot of powerful things you can do to save money on groceries. Does it take time? Yes, but to get 3 to 4 months worth of free groceries every year, absolutely worth it. Eating out, well, this is another easy one. To some extent, don't do it. Convenience is expensive. And so eating out can be expensive. So try to cut back on this. We're not saying stop it entirely because it does give you a bit of a psychological boost when you go and eat out. So that's good. Except this time they're coming in, they're delivering the food because we're not supposed to be actually eating out that much. And it's good to help the local economy, but just trying and dial it back a little bit and keep it reasonable because that can be very expensive. Utilities, consider them like any other lender. They're willing to work with you. The sooner you reach out to them if you're having problems, the more options that they can give you, the more likely they are to be able to help you. But if you go to them once you're 2 weeks late, 3 weeks late, I don't know, they may have already sent it to collections. But if you call them, before the bills go out and say, hey, I'm having some problems, what can you do? Keep in mind, they see this all the time. It's not unusual. They're there and ready to help you. And they're also aware of what's going on with COVID. So don't be embarrassed. More and more people are needing help all the time. When it comes to entertainment, many people have more than one streaming service. Okay, well, cut it down to just one. And then when things are better, you can pick up the services you dropped. And if you missed any shows, well, you can pull them up. They're all going to be there waiting for you. Never forget the value of curling up on the couch on a sunny day with a book. Walks, bike rides, jogging, you can still do all of that. Just maintain your social distance when you do it. So there's lots of things that we can still do. This is going to bring us to impulse spending. This can be a very dangerous area, and it's a way a lot of people break their budgets. People impulse spend because it makes them feel good. And if you don't know what an impulse spend is, that just basically means you spent money you didn't plan on spending. And why do we do this? Because it makes us feel better. There's actually a little science behind it. You get it's called an endorphin rush sometimes from spending money because it makes us feel good. Sometimes we're not paying, attention, and we fall prey to a marketing campaign that's really good. Or sometimes we just want to keep up with the Joneses, with our neighbors. That's generally not a good idea because I'm willing to bet you they're having problems as well. So there's lots of reasons why we do it. It's important to know that there are typically 5 main triggers, 5 main reasons why we impulse spend. And it usually involves things like time, environment, mood, place, and occasion. So those spell tempo. So those are your 5 triggers. So we're going to look at each one to get a feel for how this works. So time. Well, we all have a lot of time on our hands right now. And because we have a lot of time on our hands, are we online more often than we used to be? And we get these little ads popping up on our screen. And are we doing more online shopping because it's there and it makes us feel good and it just pops up? So you have to look at, what you're doing when you're online and to be aware of it. An easy suggestion is don't have your credit cards with you if you're online and you're just browsing and reading and whatnot, because a little ad could pop up and you go, oh, hey, that's really cool, I like that, and look, it's on sale, oh, I'm going to order it, and you've got your credit cards with you. What I sometimes suggest people do is, you put your credit cards, your bank cards, your debit cards, all your pieces of plastic, put it in a sandwich bag, fill it with water, seal it, and then put it in your freezer, right? Freeze your credit cards, because that really reduces your impulse buy, because now you just can't grab your credit card and go and buy something. You have to take that block of ice out of the freezer, plop it down on the counter, stare at it, and think hot, nasty thoughts and wait for that ice to melt. And it doesn't matter if it's 20 seconds or 2 minutes or 20 minutes, it just gives you a chance to pause. Environment, that's the E in tempo. Is your home environment driving you to spend more? Is there anything you can do to try and reduce that tendency to spend? Well, yoga. This is what my wife's doing. We all have these triggers. What my wife's doing is yoga. She's doing an online thing through YouTube, costs no money. It's called Yoga with Adrian. And so she's doing a 30-day program with it, and she's really enjoying it. She's never tried it before. So see what you can get for free off the internet. Mood, that's the M in tempo. Is this whole outbreak causing you stress and anxiety? For some people, loneliness? Absolutely, for a lot of people. So what can you do to help you process these feelings, without spending? Try connecting with someone by video or over the phone. We're connecting by video. There's lots of free apps out there that can help you do this. Or, just simply pick up the phone and call someone. So there's lots of things you can do around mood. P, place, that's the P in tempo. Is your place and the people in it making you feel a little crazy, getting a little bit of cabin fever? Perfectly normal. Is there anything you can do within the restrictions of the physical place you're in, to help distract you and help you with that? I'm doing a home exercise program. My wife's doing yoga. I'm doing something else. So again, you can go online and find different ideas, different things. You can online gaming groups. There's lots of stuff you can do, and it's free. Occasion, okay? Does this outbreak, make you want to throw your budget out the window, right? I just want to spend because I feel better. Well, a couple of things. One, remember that this is going to pass. But two, also think beyond what's going to happen after COVID-19. Occasion's a big spending trigger for a lot of people. That can be birthdays, anniversaries, Hanukkah, Christmas, year-end celebrations, whatever you choose to celebrate. Always try and have a budget for these types of things as well. It's really important to know that there's a cycle that you can see with impulse spending. So here's a very typical cycle. I had a bad day because I didn't sleep well. Okay, well, my work didn't get done. That's making me feel stressed. So now I'm going to go shopping because shopping makes me feel better, but I'm going to spend impulsively. I'm spending too much money. Well, that makes me feel guilty because I did the overspending. So now I'm worried about the money and I can't sleep. And that goes back to I had a bad day, and it creates a nasty little cycle. it's important to see the cycle and to see where you can break the cycle, right? Where can you find a way to break it? And it is going to make a big difference for you. What we encourage people to do is to create a little bit of an action plan here. And what this does, it lists the triggers for impulse buying, how it impacts you, and different ways you can go and get around it. So for example, I'll use myself as example, time. So when I drive to work in the morning, I usually don't have time for breakfast. I usually drive by McDonald's. Well, time of the day for me. I really like my Egg McMuffins. So I would impulsively spend, I'd pull into the McDonald's and I would get myself an Egg McMuffin. And then one day I went, wow, this is getting really expensive. You know, an Egg McMuffin and an orange juice, I'm running like around $7 a day. This is getting really expensive. So I identified the time, I identified what was happening. So instead I went, okay, I'm just going to find a different way to drive to work without driving past a McDonald's, you know. And that wasn't easy because those suckers are every place, but eventually I found a way around it. So this is what we suggest you do, is you try and map out your impulse buys, and it helps give you some additional control in terms of how you can manage that. Now we're going to move into managing credit, and then we'll follow that by managing debt. Remember, these are two separate and distinct items, but they are intertwined. As I mentioned earlier on, try to stop using credit. Try and focus on using cash. If you can't use cash because maybe they're not allowing cash because of the touch points, well then use a debit card with a reduced limit, or use a prepaid credit card, a prepaid Visa, prepaid MasterCard, again with a reduced limit. And that reduces the likelihood of you overspending and adding to your debt. Credit cards are very handy things, but it's easy to get into trouble. So I'll give you an example here. Let's say we've got someone who has a $3,000 balance on their credit card. And that's not that unusual. And an interest rate of 19.9%, which is the standard rate. Lots of banks right now have dropped it to 10.9, but that's just a short-term thing. When things are normal, it's going back up to 19.9. So let's focus on what's the more normal rate, 19.9. So if you have $3,000 that you're owing on your credit card and the interest rate is 19.9%, your minimum monthly payment will be 2% or $60. So I'm gonna throw a question out to you guys and chat your answers back. If you owe $3,000 on your credit card and you're making the minimum monthly payment, how long do you think it will take you to pay it off? What do you think? I'm gonna wait patiently here until at least I get one or two guesses. How long do you think it would take to pay off a $3,000 credit card if you're making just the minimum payment?
It'd be dead by the time he paid it off.
Well, you're heading down the right path. Unfortunately, the answer is it will take you almost 53 years to pay off $3,000 if you made the minimum payment, and it would cost you about $13,000 in interest for a total amount of just short of $16,000. Now, let's look at this a little bit differently. We'll keep it at $3,000 that I owe, keep the interest rate at 19.9%, but instead of making that minimum payment, I'm going to give them just an extra $40. So I'm going to bring that up to $100. So just by adding that extra $40, it's going to change it from about 53 years to pay things off to just about 3.5 years. $40 a month is knocking off almost 50 years worth of payments. Instead of about $13,000 in interest, it's just a little over $1,000. Instead of almost $16,000 in total, it's just a little over $4,000. That is a 375% difference. What we're trying to show here is if money is tight and all you can do is make your minimum payment, we understand that. That's happened to many of us throughout our lives. But if you can give just a little bit extra, $5, $10, whatever you can do, it can have a very significant impact. So if all you can do is the minimum, okay, that happens. That's life. We've all been there. But if you can do just a little bit more than that minimum, it can really help you down the road. So having moved from credit, let's move on to debt now. Main thing we can tell you about debt is if you're having any problems, if you're having any challenges, do not be afraid to go to the person, the organization, whoever that you owe the money to and say, hey, listen, I'm having some problems. Half the country was having problems before COVID. I'm sure a lot more than half are having problems now. The earlier you can get to a creditor, and that means a bank, a credit union, a family member, a utility, gas, water, electricity, cell phones, your cable, anybody, the sooner you can get to them and say, hey, I'm having a problem, what can we do? The more time they're going to have to give you some options. The later you are, the less options that are open to you. So it's very, very important to get to them. While all this is going on, it's really important that we remember that we have to consider protecting ourselves and our friends and family. And that's really what we need to focus on right now. Call your creditors if you're having any challenges. Go to the CERB portal, apply, go through the process, see what happens. If you're having some challenges, reach out to people virtually. We're doing this right now, right? We're reaching out virtually. We're using, and you can get lots of free devices. You could use Skype. You can see the people while you're talking, or just call them out on the phone if you just want to chat. It's good support. It's going to help you. So a lot of the stuff we've covering off here have been pretty serious. I'm not done yet. I got a few more slides, but I figured it'd be a good time to throw in maybe just a little bit of humor. So this chart tries to show you the relative importance of things so far this year. So coffee, if you're a coffee drinker, well, that's always been very important, right? Nothing's changed there. Your importance of your car, as all of a sudden you couldn't go to work and you had to work from home, okay, that kind of dropped off. Your interest in the use of the internet, it skyrocketed. Lots of people were having problems, and that's kind of leveled off, but it's much higher than it used to be. It's kind of funny though, as we've been staying home, the importance of shaving has gone way down. My wife said this morning, oh good, you have a webinar, you shaved this morning. And the importance of sweatpants has gone up about the same time as the importance of shaving has gone down. So, we've changed some of our patterns as we go through all this. So it's good to recognize it, good to have a little fun with it. So as we start to wrap up, and again, don't go away, I've got a few more reference slides I want to share with you. Hopefully you're able to describe a couple of ways to increase your income, list a couple of ways to reduce your expenses. Tracking is very, very important. And create a course of action to help you move forward. Because great ideas mean nothing if you don't do something with them. So this is the contact slide I was talking about, and there's a few more I want to go through with you yet, but if you are having some challenges, if you would like some help budgeting, if you would like some help talking to your creditors, that's what we do. We're a nonprofit. Just about everything we do is free. And as I mentioned, the only thing we do charge for is for that small amount of people, only about 9% who need that debt management program. There's just a couple of very small fees around that. So if you'd like some help, more specific to yourself, you can call that toll-free number. Or you can go to our website if you'd like to learn a little bit more about us. That's the nomordebts.org. We have a second website called mymoneycoach.ca. On that website, you'll get lots of information, tools and tips and Excel files and newsletters and things that can help you. It's mymoneycoach.ca is the education website. The No More Debts one here is the one that talks more about us as an organization. But again, the toll-free number will help you for whatever you're looking for. Now I've got another link here I'm going to click out to. This goes to our website, and this talks about what I was saying earlier on when I said that we can't be the expert on everything because there's too much information out there and it's changing constantly. So what we've done is we've created a page just for that. So if you go to this page, if you go to our main page, it'll be a little banner and it says click here for COVID-19, and it brings you to this. I'm just going to quickly scroll through here all the information we put together for you. So here's a section on government help that you can get for people who are working. Different types of information you can go to and get. All these green links are hyperlinks. Usually they go to a government website that's going to give you the most up-to-date information. Here is a quick little 20-minute version of the webinar you just went through. Not as much detail, but it's a good refresher. If you want, again, government help, GST credit, low to modest income families, if you're in that situation, there might be some additional resources in here that would be good for you. Information for families, information for additional income support from different provinces. So this is broken down by province for additional income support. Students and new graduates, there's information for student loans, taxes, city taxes, utilities, renters, and that's broken down by province as well. Help that you can ask for from the banks and from the credit unions, communication companies and utilities, Rogers, Shaw, wherever you use for your communications. Help for hospitality workers. If you have a business, help for businesses by province. What you can do personally to help you get through the crisis, additional general resources to help you. It could be anything from filing taxes to filling out forms and applying for CERB. We even have a section on how to look out for scams. There are people out there who are actually running scams based on CERB. So it's important that you recognize that that's out there as well. And we're actually working with the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center on that. So tons and tons of good information on this one page. So it's something that I would absolutely recommend if you're having any challenges, any questions, to call out to that. Now, a chance for you guys to make a little money off of this. We are running a little contest for anyone who goes to any of our workshops. Well, they're all webinars now. If there was anything you'd like, anything you'd want to comment on, and you go to social media, and you put in the hashtag Learn with CCS. Give us the name of the webinar. So in this case, it would be, you can just put down COVID-19 and tell us what you liked. Give us some feedback. Once a month, we're going to be doing a draw for a $50 Sobeys gift card. So you can go to your social media account, your Facebook, your Twitter, whatever it is you use, Instagram, or you can go to our page and you can post it directly on our page. So here's our Facebook page. Here we are for Twitter. Here we are for Instagram. The main thing is remember to put in hashtag Learn with CCS, the name of the webinar, and some feedback. And we'll do a draw once a month for a $50 gift certificate from Sobeys. So we can help you hopefully save a little bit on your grocery bill there. And while you're if you go to our website, you can also look at getting our monthly newsletter if you want. There's some good information and some good details there for you. We also appreciate getting feedback. And to be honest, it's part of how I get compensated, part of how I get paid for my work is surveys and the feedback that you give us, both through going through the hashtag, the Learn with CCS, and you can say Tim was awesome, or you can say Tim was so, whatever you feel. I would prefer the awesome, but truth is what's important. But also we would like you to fill out a survey. Easiest way to do that is you can go to SurveyMonkey, and I've got the website address here. So you can just, if you want, you can copy it down, surveymonkey.com, and then put this part in, and I'll take you to our survey. Or you can ask Soicety for the slides, and this will be in there. And you can just click on the link, and again, it'll take you to the survey. And that brings us to an end. Oh, look, I've got 4 minutes to spare. We like to leave this slide up at the end because this is how we'd like people to feel after they've come to see us. I don't do the individual one-on-one counseling. I deal with the groups and the large companies and things of that nature and presentations like this. But my office, I have, when I'm in my office, which hasn't been for a couple months now, I'm surrounded by 3 credit counselors. And I can always tell a new client when they're coming in. They're quiet. They're not happy to be there. They've just got this aura around them. Within 10 to 15 minutes, I can honestly say most of them are like the family you're seeing here. They're happy and they're laughing because for the most part, we can find a path for people. We can help them out, give them some solutions and show them things may not be as bad as you think they are. We can't help everyone, and I don't want to create that expectation. Some people we do need to forward on to a trustee. Some people we just aren't able to help. But like everyone else I was talking about, the sooner you come to us if you're having challenges, the more likely we are to be able of assistance to you. So with that, I'm kind of wrapping up here. I'll hang on for a little bit if anybody had any questions. Oh, good. Someone's saying good audio. Good. I'm glad you like that. Yeah, and no monkeys were harmed in the presentation. So I can hang on for a couple minutes if anybody has any questions. I'll wait, and if no one has any questions, then I will sign off, but I'll wait a couple minutes. We still have 13 people in the group, so I'll wait until I see people starting to drop off, give you a chance to type. or if you want, you can turn your audio on. And I also understand that some of the questions you might not want to ask in a public setting like this. You could either send me an email on that, and Soicety will have my email address, or you can call that toll-free number. I can always put that number back up.
Here, I typed up a question, but I don't know how to send it to you. And it says privately in red beside your name, and I don't care whether it's private or not. I just want the question.
Okay, I'm getting a bit of an echo, but I'll see if you